Thank you all for being here. It's really great. You know, it's funny, getting ready for this last night, I kind of had one eye on the evening news. And it just really struck me kind of funny that the evening news is one place where they begin the broadcast by saying good evening, and then they spend the next hour telling you why it's not, you know. But, you know, I get that. We have terrible strife in the Mideast. We have a global economy that's struggling badly. We have our own challenges here in the United States. And it's funny, we have this issue of slow growth. We have unacceptably high unemployment. But what's troubling to me most of all is people are now starting to talk about this idea of a new normal. And I think what we've got to do as leaders of the enterprise, whether the enterprise is business or politics or any kind of policy function you have, is not to accept that idea. And I think Americans deserve better. And so what I'm here to tell you today is to talk about a way forward for America, a way to play offense in this challenged environment. Now look, a lot of people are already doing a lot of good work right now. I would argue from a monetary policy standpoint, the Federal Reserve Bank is pretty much doing all they can do. Fiscal policy, however, a lot more work needs to be done. And please hear me when I say that. This is not a Republican issue. It's not a Democrat issue. This is essentially an American issue. And, you know, I know there are people that want to talk solely about cutting costs. Well, we absolutely need to do that. And I know there are people that want to continue to raise taxes. I think that will just further burden the economy. But the real issue here is we've got to be focused on growth. And when I think about growing the economy, I start with the folks that we serve in the Southeast. 4.6 million customers. And what's interesting to me is that fully 48% of the families we serve in the Southeast make less than $40,000 a year. And when I think about those families, those people make difficult, tough, kitchen table, economic decisions every day. And when I think about the accountability we share as leaders of business, of policy, of politics, why can't we? But the good news is that the energy complex in America may prove to be a way forward and really help the situation. Energy complex to me would be oil, natural gas, and electricity. And so I think it's an exciting time. There's tremendous opportunity here. And so how should you think about that? Well, first of all, I want you to start thinking about energy as kind of growth capital. Energy as a percent of GDP has been growing every year. In fact, since 1950, electricity has doubled as a percent of GDP growth. It is the leading segment in the energy complex, and it continues to grow. And so it's an exciting time. One of the things I'm working on with other people is this idea of creating energy security for North America. With the blessings of resources we have, hundreds of years of supply of oil and natural gas and coal, we can get that done perhaps as early as the end of this decade. It is a way forward for America that is so positive. Energy security breeds good national security. It breeds economic security. It is already starting a rebirth of manufacturing in America, particularly where I come from in the Southeast. It's helping the economy. It's growing more jobs, growing personal incomes. It's making lives better for the people we serve. And so this is a great opportunity for us all. It is an obligation more than an opportunity. Now, before I get to kind of what I believe about the right policy positions to adopt, particularly for electricity, I think it's first, just quickly, let's touch on how did we get to where we are. Well, so what we have right now as an energy policy is this mismatch of kind of laws and regulations. And I guarantee you when they were put in place with good intentions. But the way they exist today, they are overly complex. They don't work together particularly well. And very often they serve as a greater barrier than an enabler to a way forward for America that's positive. And so it's our job to try and put in place policies that I think may help that way forward. When I talk about electricity policy in particular, I really touch on three kind of principles. The first is, as Tom said, all the arrows in the quiver is what we've been saying, and now it became all the above. Whatever you want to call it, it's the full portfolio. Nuclear, 21st century coal, natural gas, renewables, energy efficiency. The second principle is to make as a national priority energy innovation. The third principle are some of these financial issues, and that is to restore America's financial integrity. So let's kind of dive into each one of those three. So the first one is the full portfolio. Well, Tom mentioned it. I'm delighted to say that Southern Company is one of the leaders in America in this nuclear renaissance. We've made great progress. It's a huge undertaking, $14 billion deal. We own 45.7% of it. It takes 10 years to complete. We're about halfway through that 10-year period. We're about 40% of the way through construction. And I'm delighted to report to you that last week I just was visiting the site, and we finished our base mat pour. That's the concrete pour around the reactor area for Unit 3. Fascinating stuff. When you think about the amount of concrete, just to give you a sense of scale, we'll put in place finally the amount of concrete that would build a sidewalk from Miami, Florida to Seattle, Washington. And right now we're about in Omaha.
How many employees, Tom?
Oh, geez. It's going to be 5,000 people on site, 25,000 indirect. It's a big deal. 800 permanent employees, and these employees typically get about double the personal income that otherwise you see in these rural areas. So it's a big undertaking. In order to be successful, you need three things. First is scale. Think about the size of the project. Second is financial integrity. Think about the term of the project. Third is credibility of operations. Nuclear in America is no place for beginners. It should be a national imperative. It is emissionless. It is reliable. It will be affordable for Americans and drive economic growth for decades to come. I'm proud to be part of that solution. The second was 21st century coal. Now, for a variety of reasons, coal has fallen out of favor as an energy resource in America, and I think that's bad policy. We've got to find a way forward to keep coal viable in the United States. You may know that the United States is the Saudi Arabia of coal. Something like 28% of the world's reserves reside here, and they are high-quality reserves, and they have served us so well for so long. So when we think about the new regulations that really, I think, in effect, may prevent any new conventional coal from being built, we've got to find a way forward. Southern Company is the only company in our industry that does proprietary, robust research and development. And we, along with some partners, have developed a technology that we're using in Mississippi. $2.88 billion deal. And what it does, it will take native Mississippi lignite, a resource that otherwise goes unused. We will gasify it. We will put in place some filters. We will remove somewhere between 65 and 70% of the CO2, actually less of a carbon footprint than natural gas. We will take the CO2, which otherwise people think is a waste. We will use it in something called EOR, Enhanced Oil Recovery. And so imagine this. We've got a technology in place where we will produce more domestic oil, more domestic electricity. We will use a resource in America that otherwise goes unused. We'll create jobs, more tax base, more growth for the economy. Great for the citizens of Mississippi for decades to come. Equivalent energy price, somewhere around $1.25 per million BTU. Way better than natural gas today. Big capital cost, but great energy profile. This is a way forward. We've got to preserve coal for America. This may be one way. The third area is fascinating. It's natural gas. It's the growth area right now. Southern Company ourselves has made that big bet. When we talk about big bets for Southern Company, some 5-6 years ago, we produced 70% of our energy from coal, 11% from natural gas. Southern Company is an awfully big entity. We're a little bit smaller, but from an energy production standpoint, we're similar in size to the nation of Australia. And in these 5 to 6 years, We have moved away from 70% coal to 35% of our energy from coal. We have moved natural gas from 11% now to 47%. So we've made this huge shift in a very short amount of time, and it's serving our customers' benefit exceedingly well. I am an enormous fan of natural gas, make no mistake. But I've been very public about being a little bit cautious about putting too many of our eggs in that very attractive basket. Here are the 5 reasons why, and I'm going to go through them quickly. The first issue is we've got to resolve successfully environmental concerns associated with fracking. Number 2, we've got to build out the infrastructure where the new sources of natural gas are coming from are not the conventional resources we've grown used to over years. So we need more pipes. We need firm transportation for those pipes. We need more storage. Number 3, because of the blessings of this resource, the United States is now thinking about exporting natural gas. We need to reach a reasonable level of that in the future. Number 4, there's this huge demand curve shift going on in the United States. And let's think about it. My own industry is consuming a lot more. Manufacturing in America is consuming a lot more. Coupled with exporting, let me give you a fact. In 2011, the United States consumed about 67 BCF, that's billions of cubic feet, of natural gas per day. There are estimates right now that suggest that the consumption of natural gas could rise to over 100 BCF per day by the end of the decade. And I ask you, what happens to price and what happens to volatility? We need to address these issues. And one of the issues that we're going to need to address is point 5. It's a little technical, but it's very important. And that is counterparty credit risk. Remember I mentioned we're one of the biggest energy producers in the United States. We are now the 3rd largest consumer of natural gas. Remember we talked about financial integrity. We have about the highest level of financial integrity in our industry. That's by design. About half of the natural gas producers have credit ratings that are barely investment grade or less. In order for the United States to make these important steps forward for natural gas, we need to make sure that we have a viable producing industry of natural gas in the United States. That is critical for us to manage supply, price, and volatility over time. But please understand, for all those cautionary tales, I'm a huge believer in natural gas as a way forward. It is not a panacea. It is not a place where you can put all your eggs in the basket. Item number 4 are renewables. Well, renewables are exciting. Prices are coming down. Great stuff. But in my opinion, renewables will only remain a niche resource for America at least through the end of the decade, particularly in the Southeast. Here's why. Issue number 1, especially I'm going to talk probably in terms of solar and wind. Where there are great solar and wind resources, there are no people. And so what we must do is move the energy resource to where the people are. That means you're going to rely more and more on transmission. And we know, given our experience with the blackouts in the Midwest and the Northeast and in the desert Southwest, the greater the distance, the greater the risk. The second issue is, because this is an intermittent resource, what do you do when the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine? And we know that when that happens, you've got to rely on a backup generation resource that is most likely to be gas, and now you are doubling down again on that gas bet. And then item number 3 is simply this. The United States has decided they want to put a lot of tax preference items to accrue to the benefit of the renewables industry. How long can the United States continue to pick winners and losers? So that's kind of an interesting item. I love renewables, particularly solar in our case, biomass. But I can tell you, in my opinion, it is not the long-term solution for energy production in America. It is important, but it's not going to be the widespread solution. Item number 5 is energy efficiency, and it's a simple concept. You know, the cleanest kilowatt hour is the one that is never produced or consumed. And so I'm all for that. But let me explain something. A lot of people translate energy efficiency as use less. I think that's badly mistaken. The idea is to use it more wisely. I want you to use more. Why? Let's think about those 48% of the families that make $40,000 or less. I want them to live in better housing. I want them to have better medical treatment. I want them to educate better. I want them to eat better. As our standard of living increases, our consumption of energy necessarily increases. Consuming more energy will stand to improve our society. There is nothing wrong with consuming more energy. Let's just do it in the most wise manner possible. So that's kind of the full portfolio. I'm really proud to say that Southern Company is the only company doing all of those segments, right? We've committed over $20 billion. We've created over 250,000 jobs in that respect. So that's the first part, the full portfolio. The second part is energy innovation. I mentioned our emphasis as a company. And in fact, we're coming out with a new book on our story of research and development, probably out later this spring. But that needs to be a national imperative. When you think about the value that's been created in America from IT, when we think about IBM and personal computers and Apple and Google and the whole realm, think about how wonderful that's been. Think about this notion that, in fact, cheap, abundant, clean, reliable, affordable energy is an economic engine to these United States. We should continue to invest as a national imperative in energy innovation, okay? And think about already what's happened and how valuable that's been. The drilling, innovations that we've developed in the United States have helped us get all this access to cheap, abundant natural gas. In our own industry, think about the technology we're developing in Mississippi and a way forward for coal. We've got to continue to innovate around that. From a consumption standpoint, think about kind of the idea of smart meters. We've deployed over 4.4 million smart meters. And it's not just the smart home that may be turned on, but I think what is undersold in our industry is how much smart meters help us operate the system better. When tornadoes went through Tuscaloosa, Alabama a couple years ago, by virtue of the smart meters that we had deployed there, we were able to restore those citizens, we think, about 25% sooner, more effectively than otherwise we would have been able to. It's a huge advantage. We need to redouble as a national priority energy innovation. The third area really goes to this idea of restoring America's financial integrity. Well, why would I worry about that? Well, let's think about it. The whole energy complex, oil, natural gas, electric utilities, but electric utilities especially, are one of the most capital-intensive industries in the world. And when I talked about some of the statistics, this $20 billion allocation to the full portfolio, a $14 billion nuclear plant, and we need to build more. We need an environment in this nation's markets where we have predictable, constructive economic markets to support our ability to commit to long-term CapEx. Southern Company spends in capital expenditures every year about $5.5 to $6 billion a year. Our industry is over $90 billion a year. So what are the barriers to this kind of restoring America's financial integrity? Well, here again, there's three. Number one, and I've already touched on it a little, is overreaching regulation. In fact, particularly from EPA, we are setting energy policy by regulators who are accountable to no electorate. That is the job of Congress. And when I think about what I'm responsible for, what we're responsible for in our industry, is clean, safe, reliable, affordable energy that will drive this economy forward. The EPA does not have that mantle and cannot be responsible for that full portfolio of responsibility. We are. And I can tell you today, overreaching regulation is the gunk in the engines of commerce. It is more a barrier than an enabler, and that's what we need. The second issue really goes to this idea of restoring America's balance sheet. We all know the national debt is a huge issue. And whether you believe in reducing costs or increasing taxes, you've got to be for growth. Because if we don't solve the debt problem in this nation, our kids, and maybe even by the end of this decade, we will see inescapably higher taxes, higher interest rate. We've got to get this right. And then the third point really goes to kind of a technical issue, but I think it's timely, I think it's important, and I think we've got to take the responsibility to get this right and not serve our own parochial interests. And that is tax policy. You know, when you look at the tax code now, I mean, it's this Byzantine, complex, inscrutable mess that we probably spend as much figuring it out as we do paying taxes, for heaven's sakes. And I've been very much on record about kind of what Southern Company would be willing to do. I think we need to kind of start with a clean slate. And here's what I've said. Southern Company would want to keep the tax items it has right now. We want to keep something called normalization, which allows us to flow those benefits back to customers in a fair way over time. But we would be willing to forego all future tax preference items. Accelerated depreciation, investment tax credit, alternate fuels credits, you name, in exchange for certainty around a flat corporate rate over time, like 25%. That's kind of where I think our math is. And what's interesting is our math is roughly the same for my industry's math and is the same roughly for industrial America's math. But I will be the first one to say that within that simple math, there are winners and losers all over the place. And it's going to be very hard to rise above our parochial interests. But I can tell you, starting with comprehensive tax reform, I think is the right approach. If we try to fight a land war, fighting each specific regulation and law, we will never get to where we need to be for the benefit of the citizens of the United States. So those are kind of the three big principles: the full portfolio, energy innovation as a national priority, and then restoring America's financial integrity. So look, in closing, I think I can make the point here that we have a lot to gain by getting this right. It is a wonderful opportunity. Moreover, it's an obligation for the policy leaders of business and politics in America. And when I talk about clean, safe, reliable, affordable energy, that's a wonderful thing, but you know what? It's not enough. When I think about the responsibility and accountability we have as leaders of the enterprise, whatever the enterprise is in your definition, I always talk to folks at Southern about two concepts: the what's and the hows of our business. The what's of our business is to make, move, and sell electricity for the benefit of the customers we serve. But as important, and perhaps more powerfully, are the hows of our business. And the hows really go to how we treat customers, the families we serve, how we treat external policyholders, how we treat each other. We've got to have this idea that we are bigger than our bottom line. We've got to serve an interest greater than our own. We've got to make sure that the communities we serve are well served by our service over time, that they're better off because we're there. We've got to be great citizens wherever we serve. It's a wonderful obligation. When I think about the service that the electric utility industry provides to its customers over decades in the past and decades to come, when I think about electricity's role as part of the energy complex going forward and how increasingly important it is in this economy as it gets more and more electrified, this is a wonderful opportunity. It is a way for us all to play offense in a challenged environment. And I think we will benefit the economy and ultimately benefit the citizens of America by being successful. And I'm proud to be a part of that. Thanks very much.